Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mel Ve, coming to you live from Conscious Consumer Network, the most educational channel on the internet. So thank you for being with us wherever you may be this fine evening. Of course, it is 7 p.m. GMT, making 8 p.m. here in Central Europe, and that makes time for Dragonology in its usual Wednesday slot. And of course, this is season 3, and wow, what a season it has been. And tonight we will be continuing with episode 9 of season 3, which takes on the very interesting subject of sacred geometry, or should we say dragon geometry. Okay, let's go. This is going to be a good one. So for most of you who come into this sort of information, you may have heard the term sacred geometry before, but you probably don't really understand the depth of what sacred geometry is really all about, and how it is in fact tied so inextricably with dragon symbolism. And as it says here, and this is actually gotten out of Wikipedia as a description of sacred geometry. Sacred geometry ascribes symbolic and sacred meaning to certain geometric shapes and certain geometric proportions. It is associated with the belief that a god is the geometer of the world. The geometry used in the design and construction of religious structures such as churches, temples, mosques, religious monuments, altars, and tabernacles as being considered sacred as it was derived from dragons. Sacred geometry principles apply to sacred places such as sacred groves, villages, greens, holy wells, and is especially found in the creation of religious art. Okay, I'm going to be honest here. I put in dragons instead of gods. But when we're talking about Dragonology, we're always referencing the gods. For those of you who are familiar with this series, you'll understand what I mean by that. But that is a kind of loosely taken from Wikipedia, slightly adapted. But what is interesting is you find sacred geometry principles being used in areas which have been carefully measured out to ascribe to these principles. And there's a very deep and important reason why. It's not just because you had a bunch of old geezers who were so square that they were hung up on everything being mathematically succinct, and, you know, you probably think, oh, no creation, you know, why couldn't they just made a blobby shape like church? But there was a specific reason why they made things the way they did, and these skills passed down into secret orders such as the Freemasons, because of course they became people who were responsible for creating the sacred geometry within the churches that they constructed. We've covered this account of Barossus, who spoke about Owanis, but I've dealt with various aspects of this account. I'm going to read through it again tonight, and then deal with another aspect of this particularly, because we're going to be dealing with this tonight. Of course, we have spoken about in previous Dragonologies how after a great deluge, there came dragon gods, fish gods, wind serpent gods in different parts of the world, came to various parts of the world and brought the gifts of civilization and knowledge. And of course, this is the Barossus account of Owanis, who came to create what became known as the Babylonian culture. And Barossus said, a man, or rather a monster, half man, half fish, coming from the sea, appeared near Babylon. He had 2 heads, one which was the highest resembled that of a man, and the other that of a fish. He had the feet of a man and the tail of a fish, and his speech and voice resembled that of a man. A representation of him is still preserved. Of course, there's many carvings of him. We've seen this in many different reliefs and sculptures that have been found. This monster dwelt by day with men, but took no food. He gave them knowledge of letters arts and science, and he taught them to build towers and temples to establish laws. He instructed them in the principles of geometry. And that's where we're going tonight. And of course, we've dealt with the other aspect, which is, of course, he taught them to sow and gather fruits from the earth. And we've dealt with that in previous Dragonologies. And of course, he taught them anything that could contribute to polish and civilize their manners, anything that could create a modern civilization, to take them from being gatherers, tribesmen, nomads, to actually being people who settled, who became agrarian in culture, who cultivated the land, who began building temples and based them upon principles of sacred geometry. And where did they get all this knowledge from? Well, it came from the gods of the dragons, which come up in so many different cultural mythologies. And of course, this is the account of the cultural mythology that occurred in Babylon. And the god there was, of course, known as Oannes. And we had various versions of this in South America. You had Viracocha, who had a similar story, Quetzalcoatl as well, Mesoamerican culture. You've got this coming up in various places. So this is interesting. We've got this coming up in Egyptian mythology as well. After a great deluge, the god Thoth created all the other gods and helped build civilization and restored order to Egypt. It's the same story, just different names given to different gods, but ultimately they all are in fact just representations of the dragon. So let's carry on with this and dive deep into geometry, which is actually dragon mathematics or dragon numerology, or sacred geometry as people want to call it. Now, for those of you, when you hear the word geometry, I mean, the first thing you think of, or at least the first thing I thought of when I started hearing terms like sacred geometry was, I like my geometry classes when I was in school, and I had really the most awful, really horrendous mathematics teacher. She really wasn't inspiring at all, but we had to have this geometry set, and she would come around and do an inspection to make sure that we had every single part of the geometry set that we needed, which included, of course, a compass and a pencil and a sharpener for the pencil, and we had to have the square and the protractor with the degrees on. We had to have a rubber and a ruler. And those were the basics in order for us to be able to participate in what we called geometry classes, which were a module of our math education in high school. And I hated it. I mean, every time I opened up this little case with these implements in them, I just used to get the most thinking sense inside of me. Oh, this is so uninteresting, and I would be so bored. And I wish that I had been taught geometry in the way I've come to know geometry through my own self-directed learning and understanding the beautiful sequences and hidden mathematical codes that really show you the true secrets of our universe, just how this entire matrix is that pulled together by geometry and numbers. And it really is a beautiful thing when you sort of decode and deconstruct this entire element. Now, I'm going to be dealing with three basic symbols tonight, or at least three basic shapes, which is what you would call them in sort of our native English term, shapes, okay? Or what you would teach a child are shapes: triangle, square, and circle. Those are the three elements I'm going to be dealing with tonight and showing you how just those three basic shapes of geometry, okay, are so key to everything that unfolds from it. And of course, if you look at the basic geometry set, you can see here's a half circle, that's a half sphere. And you've got what could then make up the square, because if you put another one on the other side, you'd have a square with it, but you're able to get a perfect right angle with these measurements of these rulers. And of course, you can create a circle with a compass. Okay, that is what the compass is especially designed for, is for creating perfect circles. And yeah, as we said, triangle, square, and circle, all of these things can be seen as shapes you can create with a geometry set. And they are the basic three things we're going to be dealing with in dragon geometry tonight in our Dragonology. The first one we're going to begin with is the circle. And this is really interesting because there's so many allegories which I could go into to express just how the word circle actually is very much a dragon root word. And of course, starting with the obvious, the Cir, C-I-R, of circle is pretty much the same root word of the Sir of serpent. So those two share a common root. What's also interesting is you say the word Sir L and you've got the E on the other side of the L, but if you put the E in front of the L, you've got the key dragon root word L, which is the Hebrew expression of Il, as an Illuminati. Il is the Latin expression, and the AL would be the Arabic expression of El, Elohim, or a shortening of the words referencing the dragons. But Sir and El, two key dragon root words in the word circle. Now, if you start looking at the words such as oval, and there's various other ways in which you can describe circles in other language, you keep coming back to the fact that each of these are very key distinctive dragon root words. And that is because my belief is that the symbol of the circle, or even the letter O, originated with the dragon. And this is a good illustration of it because when we deal with this realm of dragonology, you commonly come across something called the Ouroboros. And as you'll see if you read my book, Dragonology, Book 1, Spellbreaker, the Ouroboros is a representation of the serpent eating its tail. And it comes up in every cultural mythology across the world. It doesn't matter where you go, you'll find depictions of the Ouroboros. And it's a very key mystical and really powerful magical symbol and has very, very deep, ancient symbolic allegory. But it is so important that it even created its own letter in our language, and that is where we get the letter O from. In fact, there are 4 letter O's in the word Ouroboros. And as I say, these symbols are not by accident, okay? The circle, as you say, the word even comes from the similar root word of serpent. But when you start to look at the circle where it turns up in our alphabet, being the letter O, it comes from the Ouroboros. Again, present in many different cultural mythologies across the world, without exception. All right, moving on to the star. Now, of course, the star really, in this context, is just 2 overlapping triangles, okay, which is one of the primary shapes we spoke about when we started this series or this particular episode. And the star is one of the most commonly recognized expressions of dragon or sacred geometry. Let's just be honest, it's dragon geometry. And there's various expressions of the star. I'll take you through a few of them. Essentially, the most commonly known ones are an inverted triangle overlapping a right up triangle. And some people know this as a Jewish symbol, known as the Star of David. It's not really a Jewish symbol. It's actually a much more ancient symbol. It only was made the star, it was made a Jewish symbol when, I think it was after the Second World War, when Israel was reconstructed. But it's also interesting to notice is you find this triangle symbol in the interlocking version, which is actually the more accurate and original version of the symbol because it comes from ancient pagan origins, and the ancient pagan origins depict the symbol as an interlocking triangles, not as in one triangle laid on top of another, but a set of interlocking triangles rather. But that obviously has been stylized into different ways. And, it turns up in just so many different religions. People think it is a Jewish symbol. No, what this is an ancient symbol present in many ancient religions. And in fact, the Rothschilds who made this symbol, the symbol of Israel, did so because they, in their occult circles, actually practice this deep, dark, occult, satanic religion themselves. And they kind of really tarnished the Jewish faith by sort of bringing these symbols and making it the symbols of the Jewish faith. It comes from a much sort of darker occult origin. And that's the same for all of these symbols that turn up in modern day religion, without exception, be it Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. In fact, you can find these star symbols, six-sided star, overlapping each other in religions you wouldn't even expect, such as the Hindu. This is the Hindu mandala, symbol of the six-sided star made up of two overlapping triangles, and you may notice surrounded in a circle, and that's very common too. You'll find that often the six-pointed star is surrounded in a circle. Very common in terms of in ritual practice. You create a sacred circle, and normally you'd find the six-pointed star inside, which is used as a protective element, and anything inside the circles is protected from entities and demonic spirits. That's very important. This is a very sacred symbol, understood even on other realms and by entities on other levels. And that, of course, is important because we will go there this evening and explain why. Of course, as we've been saying, this symbol turns up very commonly in alchemy, associated as a star or a sun symbol in its morphic allegory, but also the circle surrounding it can be the Zodiac, which is depicted over here. And really, the circle around it like this is a really more stylized version of what ultimately would more or less be a cosmic egg or a zodiac. As we talk about in Dragonology last week, we spoke about what the cosmic egg is and the significance of the egg. But this is a more interesting occult or alchemical depiction of the six-pointed star with its various symbolic representations, which are normally only understood by initiates of magic or secret societies, complete with Latin inscription as well. So, yeah, very interesting little symbol, this. But what's interesting to notice as well is the six-pointed star is commonly referenced as a hexagram. And it's commonly used as a symbol of occult rituals. Now, the word hex is interesting because it can actually reference several things, okay? In Latin, it actually can mean six, the number six. That's what hexagram means, the six-sided gram or six-sided shape or form. But or six-pointed form, I should say. But the word hex can also reference a spell, as in I put a hex on someone, or I put a spell on someone, or it can reference a witch. In fact, the Dutch and German word for witch is a hex. And I live in Holland, and I grew up in South Africa speaking Afrikaans, which is derived from Dutch, and we call witches hexes. In fact, we had a little childhood character called Lieve Hexie, which was a little witch, a little story about a little witch, which is very sweet and all childlike, very Harry Potter-like. But it's a commonly known word for witch, hex. But it's also interesting to notice that the word hex in Latin also means six. Of course, this hexagram or six-pointed star turns up in various elemental and magical expressions, and there's so many different interpretations of it. This would be the planetary star expressing various relations to the zodiac, and this would be more the elemental star expressing more relations towards the energies of Earth. And we've spoken, funny enough, because the dragon allegories and symbolism relate very heavily to the various things that we see mentioned in this particular expression, being spirit, being light, fire, water, darkness. And of course, we've covered that all off in various allegories and shown various illustrations of these particular points in previous dragonologies. But there's so many different ways in which the star symbol has deep and multi-level, multicultural symbolic allegory that goes back a very long time. In fact, this symbol is so important that it turns up in occult or sort of pagan belief systems and societies. The Theosophical Society, of course, is started by Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, one of my absolute favorite people to read. Helena Blavatsky's works are just absolutely amazing. The Secret Doctrine, Book 1 and 2. Absolutely amazing wisdom of this woman for her time. A lot of it now, you can kind of do the research and see where she was perhaps not in access or not able to reach all the information, but for her time, she really was an amazing woman. Commonly gets misunderstood and declared as evil and this and that because she obviously had magazines and stuff called Lucifer and pushed some very controversial teachings for people who are very, very religious and tied into the Christian worldview. They really famed Blavatsky's work and, you know, she's just demonized by them. But as well, Blavatsky used this interlocking six-pointed star in the Theosophical Society logo. And what's also interesting to notice is the occurrence of the serpent. Now, the serpent tends to turn up again as the circle, serpent, circle, again and again and again. In fact, the serpent symbol turns up so often when we go through this information because, in fact, the serpent is the primary representation of the dragon. And, of course, here just to go through this, the hexagram, hexagram being Greek, or sexagram, sexagram is Latin, forms the central part of the symbol of the Theosophical Society. Now, it's interesting to notice that hexagram is Greek, sexagram is Latin. And the Freemason symbol also has this very interesting look, the interlocking, okay, so it's indicating the pagan intention of this, or the pagan expression of this symbol, the occult expression of this symbol, interlocking. This is a jewel, if I'm not mistaken, from 1814. And this comes from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry written by Albert G. Mackey. The interlacing triangles or deltas symbolize the union of the two principles or forces, the active and passive, male and female, pervading the universe. The two triangles, one white and the other black, interlacing typify the mingling of apparent opposites in nature, darkness and light, error and truth, ignorance and wisdom, evil and good, throughout human life. All right, and that, I would say, is probably the clearest expression I could give of what these two triangles which form this interlocking star actually mean. Now, you find these patterns turning up in some incredibly interesting places, like, as you say, the Theosophical Society, the Freemasons, and in crop circles. You know, whoever are making these crop circles, be it coming from the earth or be it some kind of consciousness by projecting these designs onto this grassy fields or crop fields, they really do have an understanding of human history and the occult symbols that we've been using, because that is absolutely phenomenal in its precision. And it's very hard to believe that this is made by two human beings, because it's just too perfect. There is definitely some higher dynamic involved with this. So the six-pointed star or hexagrams have been created in crop circle designs more than once. And here's another interesting place that this hexagram turns up, you know, apart from crop circles, Freemasons logo, and occult secret magical societies. You find this hexagram on the back of the $1 bill. And, you know, it's not the only interesting symbol you find on the $1 bill. Of course, those of you who are familiar with this information will know. You also find the all-seeing eye and pyramid symbol on the $1 bill too. So it's interesting that you then find this one, the hexagram, one of the primary symbols of occult knowledge. And of course, as we have already indicated, hexagram, of course, being the Greek, sexagram being the Latin. And of course, you wouldn't be wrong to notice that the word hex and sex are etymologically cognizant with each other, okay? As much as the word sex and six are etymologically cognizant with each other. And that is very interesting, because we go to an interesting place with this. And we notice that, of course, there is a six-pointed star, and hexagram means six-pointed star. So you can see how it all translates down into each other. This is a very interesting occult, alchemical depiction that I found. Again, love this. The two dragons, probably one representing male, one representing female, which is of course what is represented by the two overlapping stars. Notice the all-seeing eye symbol in this particular one. And notice the sun, the moon, and what do we have down here? A winged being with horns, representative of the dragon. Now, as we've already established, the sex element comes in at this stage when you start looking at some of the depictions I found on Google of hexagrams, and they seem to be one of the central principles that are achieved, or they try to recreate the shape when they are practicing sort of sex magic or tantra, where they try to move the sexual serpent, or the kundalini as they call it, and you can see it represented here as wrapped around these two people. The kundalini energy activates through both people by achieving this six-pointed star shaped union. Very interesting. Of course, here's another expression of it, except here you've got the hexacursal hexagram, unicursal hexagram, I beg your pardon. It's the unicursal hexagram, which you can kind of make out in this particular representation, whereas this one you clearly see that's a double-sided star. The unicursal hexagram is a six-pointed star that can be traced or drawn unicursally, meaning in one continuous line rather than by two overlapped equilateral triangles. The word unicursal contains the word curse, a shortening, obviously, of the curse with the E at the end. And really is a reference to the same thing, because a curse is the same thing as a spell, it's the same thing as a hex, which we've already spoken about. So that's interesting that they've used the word curse here, because the word curse is actually the same thing as a hex. So the word curse, as you say, is a synonym for spell or hex. And it looks like this. You can just draw it in one line without having to lift your pen. And in fact, this was the symbol of Aleister Crowley's cult called the Thelema. Interesting that they like to use the six-pointed star, much like Madame Blavatsky, all these occult secret societies and magical orders. And here as well, as I said, notice how many times the serpents seem to turn up in these depictions with these stars. Universal hexagram art, commonly depicted with serpents. Amazing how much of this sort of thing you'd find on Google. You just go and have a little look. Clearly there's some kind of connection or symbolic allegory, as you know there is. But of course the fact that this is a common depiction, lots of serpents with these various representations of the six-pointed star. Of course, it's all dragon allegory, as we already know. And we need to understand one of the deeper allegories of this six-pointed star, the hexagram, which is not just about the negative and positive, male, female, yin and yang, evil, good, active and passive generative principles of the universe. It's actually, it goes on to a much deeper level. One known as above, so below. What happens in the heavens happens on the earth. And we've spoken loads about sort of the chthonic deities, and the ones who could fly, the ones who are above and the ones who are below. And this for me is very much an indication of showing that yes, the dragons kind of, you know, are within the earth and above in the air. And it's kind of the know yourself, what you have within, you project without, you know, as above, so below, as within, so without. There's many, many layers of this sort of allegory that goes on when you go through the deeper spiritual schools, such as Kabbalah mysteries, etc. They go much deeper into this sort of stuff. But what is interesting to notice, of course, at this stage is that it very much is a commonly known depiction of as above, so below. But this is also known as the Great Seal of Solomon. I do want to talk about this for a bit because it's very interesting, these depictions. do go, if you can, and read the Goetia, the Lesser Keys of Solomon, which was translated by Liddell and McGregor Mathis, and edited with an introduction Crowley. And what you find inside the Goetia is the 72 sigils of the demons of hell, that each one of these corresponds to a different demon. And Solomon was able to call these demons, and in fact, these demons were summoned to do things like build his temple and all sorts. He had amazing power, apparently by using magical rings, which is the story of Lord of the Rings comes from. And what you notice around this side of this book is various depictions of these demons in various different forms, stereotypic animal forms, which are in fact all representations of the dragon. We've covered this all in the previous Dragonologies. Every single one of these animals has some kind of symbolic link to the dragon. Okay, so back to the as above, so below. You see the symbol, you see this allegory, you see this up and down, as above, so below, coming up in various expressions in the world of occult and paganism. Of course, in our more modern day culture, you'll see this going on in sort of high-profile ritual performances such as the Grammys or various award events. And, of course, you know, Madonna is a very high-ranking priestess, and the Hollywood Illuminati elite participates in rituals. And, of course, this is her with a crown of Hathor on her head, pointing down and pointing up, much like this depiction of Baphomet. Again, notice the light and dark, as we've already discussed, that allegory, negative and positive, as per the triangles which interlock and point up and down. This allegory goes deep. And notice again, you always have those serpents turning up with wherever you find the symbolism. And again, the winged being. Okay, here's another depiction with the up and down. And this one over here is the magician, and it turns up in tarot. Right, and this is very interesting, that as well, pointing up and pointing down, because we're going to go here in a minute. Notice the figure 8 symbol on top of the magician's head. Okay, lots of interesting symbols here. You've got the chalice, could be the Holy Grail, you know, holding up the lights, you know, which you can associate with the Statue of Liberty. You can associate that with the Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity. And of course, the sword and chalice, again, male and female principles of ritual. One, you put the sword into the chalice, representative of the sexual union. Oh, and what do we have here? A 5-pointed star. The stars always turn up. But what we want to look at this for a minute is this little guy here. You go and read my book, Dragonology Spellbreaker Book 1. I go into great depth and detail about halos and what they are symbolically representative of. We get into the etymology of it all and show you different types of halos from different religions. But the figure 8 or eternity symbol turns up and forms the halo of the magician in the tarot card, okay? And this can be a figure 8, known as a figure 8, and people say it's an eternity symbol because it's never ending. But what it is actually pertaining to is it's hidden allegory pertaining to the sun. The halo is always a sun symbol. It's a hidden sun symbol. It's meant to mean someone sacred. It's also meant to reference someone who is a dragon or of the royal dragon bloodline. And it's, you know, interesting that it turns up like this, because if you start to look at the course of the sun through the sky, it's called the analemma. For example, this picture would be taken by a camera at the same time every day over the course of a year. And what this does is it marks the places in the sky where the sun is at the same time on different days of the year. And you'll notice that the sun makes this kind of figure 8 configuration going through the sky. Photos taken at the same time every day over the course of the year, and you will see exactly where the sun is, and that the actual travel of the sun through the sky and the image it makes is actually in the form of a figure 8, and it's known as the analemma, this figure 8, okay, as we see, also turns up in the halo of the magician. Now, I'll get onto the sun allegory in a moment, but I don't want to digress too far from what we are here to discuss, which is, in fact, the sacred geometry elements of Dragonology. Now, what is interesting to notice, and we spoke a bit about Freemasons and of course how the interlocking star turns up in their symbolism, but notice here as well, you have as above, so below symbol going on here, really just a slightly simplified, more stylized version of the six-pointed star. And that is made up by the intersecting square and compass, okay? Now, this is often known as a ruler because you use it to rule lines, but it really makes the side of a right angle or a square, something you would typically find in that geometry box we looked at earlier, much like you'd find typically a compass. This one doesn't have a pencil attached, but this one has 2 points. But what they are now put over each other much like this is they are creating that six-pointed star, that as above, so below. Very important to notice that because that is an occult principle that runs so deep through so many religions and secret societies. And of course, we previously covered off what the G means, so I'll leave that one alone for tonight. But as above, so below in the Freemason symbol, using what we find in common geometry sets being the square and compass. Now we go into the allegory of the square because this is all very interesting, and I just love how the stuff all goes together. You'll notice the square, as I've already spoken about, is made up of 90-degree right angles. And if you add them all up together, you end up at 360 degrees. So 90 degrees plus 90 degrees makes 180, plus 90 degrees plus 90 degrees brings you up to 360 degrees. Now, if you look at 360 degrees, it's the full circle of a protractor. So a right angle is measured at 90 degrees. Don't forget that. We're going to get onto the numerology of Dragonology and sacred geometry tonight because this gets very interesting. And this 90 degrees angle is known as a right angle. And we're going to get onto the etymology of the word right and angle so you guys understand exactly how deeply rooted this stuff is and just how cleverly it is interwoven into the very fabric of our existence, through our language, through the numbers, through the very shapes around us. Now, I do want to point out before we go on to talk about the rights and the things that attach to the etymology, is that the square actually goes on to make a cube by putting 6, again, like the 6-pointed sides, 6 sides of a square together, because a cube has 6 sides, right? So again, it's that 6-pointed star, 6-sided figure makes up the cube with the square. And what's interesting to notice is that the square and the cube actually conceals the 6-pointed star, because what you've got here is if you put this line across here, you've got the 2 triangles, which then you could have the one upright and the one going down, intersecting, making this star shape that we've been talking about, okay, the star shape here, so that they actually can fit into a square, kind of. But it is very interesting to notice that this shape conceals the star because it has the 2 triangles in it. And of course, these 2 triangles being represented above, as we've already discussed, male, female, light, dark, day, night, good, evil, the active and passive generative principles of the universe. Now, where these squares turn up is very important. We think when we're walking through churches and we see squared or checkered tiles on the floor that it's just because, they needed square tiles, but there is a very, very, very good reason for why they do this. The square covertly implies the dragon footprint, as indicated by the common use of tessellation, which is like checkerboard tiles, light and dark tiles, which turn up in many churches, temples, or sacred places. And you'll notice this is actually not even tiles. I think this is a carpet in a Masonic lodge. And here you'll notice the square and compass again, with the 6-pointed star turning up on the edge of this carpet. So notice where all the symbolism turns up and how important it is. Now, the cube is very interesting because the cube, as we said, is a 3-dimensional expression of the square. It has 6 sides. And the word cube contains the dragon root CU from the word group, kolu, beg pardon, Kulu, Kula, Kolo, Kolu, and Kola. And of course, there's more of that, Kali, Koli, etc. But it's this particular word group is where you get the CU root, which turns up in the word cube. And what's interesting to notice is that the cube is just a shape that turns up in some fantastically spectacular places, because the word cube is etymologically cognizant with the Arabic word kab, cube, kab. And of course, this particular word means the heel of the foot, which is why it is said that the square covertly implies the dragon footprint, because it has to do with the heel of the foot, which is the kab, the heel of the foot. And this is indicative of the Kaaba in Mecca. The Kaaba in Mecca is, of course, this cube-shaped shrine which contains this black rock, which is, you know, a lot of historical allegory attached to it. Won't get into that. But the actual shrine surrounds it is called, the Kaaba stone is kept in this sort of cube-shaped square black building, which, of course, Muslims are commanded by Muslim law to Islamic law to go there at least once in a life. It's a pilgrimage. It's called the Hajj, and they walk around this particular square as part of their pilgrimage. And here they're all bowing down and praying towards this particular cube. Now, what's interesting to notice, I want to talk a bit about the right angle. We're going to get into the etymology of that, because it's very important to understand how interesting and how deeply rooted the symbolic allegory is into these things. Of course, the right angle being the 90-degree angle of the triangle. The 90-degree angle of the square. What makes a square is the fact that it has 90-degree right angles. The word right angle, or the term right angle, contains the word right, okay? Take away the GH and you got the RIT, which contains the key dragon root word rit, okay? So the word right, obviously, you can clearly see key dragon root word rit. And the other interesting words where rit turns up is right, as in a religious rite, or ritual, as in writing with a pen or writing a letter, and ivrit. Ivrit is Hebrew word for Hebrew, believe it or not. The Hebrew is called Hebrew ivrit. Interesting. Okay, so angle. The word angle is very interesting because, as you may notice, it's very similar to the word angel. So to add to the sacred aspect of sacred geometry, the word angle is etymologically cognizant with the word angel, right? Very important. That's not by accident. You call it a triangle. You know, it's a very deep symbolic allegory there. The word angel then, of course, originates with the Latin words angui or anguiem, which of course are just more Latin words referencing the serpent or the dragon. Interesting. Of course, notice here the halo, which is a representation of the sun, and we should explore that more as we go through that. But the halo commonly turns up in this kind of art, along with the winged beings, which of course this is a typical expression of an angel. But of course we know now angels are in fact dragons. So getting a little bit deeper into the dragon numerology, a key aspect of Dragonology is, in fact, the numerology. Know the numerology and it's easier to decipher the deception of the dragon. A key dragon numerical code are the divisibles of 3. Okay? You'll notice this comes up quite a lot, these divisibles of 3 in these patterns and codes. 3, 6, 9, 12, they, you know, all divisible by 3, and you'll notice these numbers come up again and again and again, interwoven into the fabric of our existence in order to lock the dragon vibration. Interesting to notice that the degrees of Freemasonry, there are 33 degrees of Freemasonry, and you can count them. There's the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33 degrees, officially 33 degrees in Freemasonry. Again, we notice that the square and compass over there, square and compass over there. But as you say, divisibles of 3, 33 degrees in Freemasonry. And of course, occult numerology. Who doesn't know the famous 666? Which, of course, this is what you're looking at when you've got these triangles. They say that these triangles are representative of the satanic number 666, because what you have are 6 points, 6 mini triangles, all right, and then, of course, a 6-sided polygon inside, okay, which is supposed to be symbolically representative of 666, which, of course, is supposedly a satanic number. Now, what's interesting to notice, of course, is the measurements of angles. Right? We've spoken a lot about what right and what angle means and where they come from and the etymological roots and the symbolic allegory behind it. So let's have a little deeper look at the numbers. For example, right angle is 90 degrees. That's a 90-degree right angle over there. As you can see, if you were to measure that angle, it would be a 90-degree right angle. And of course, 90 is divisible by 3. Take away the 0, you can divide that by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Then you've got the half sphere, which is from here all the way over to here, coming in at 180 degrees. And of course, that's 90 plus 90 equals 180, again, divisible by 3. And if you take the 0 away, you add the 1 and the 8, again, you've got 9. Very, very interesting. And then, of course, the full sphere, which is the 360 degrees. Okay, so you go from here all the way around to 360 degrees. And of course, if you took the 0 away, you add the 3 and the 6, you got 9 again. So this 369 or 333 and 666 and those kind of repeating numbers in those patterns of geometric symmetry come up again and again. And what they're indicating is a deep symbolic mathematical code, not by accident, but really by design. You know, clearly there is a higher intelligence which is behind all of this. Now we're going to take you on to explain why the degrees are the way they are. And to understand this, you need to understand the relationship between geometry and the sun. And of course, the sun is a very important symbol when we're talking about Dragonology. And if you haven't understood that, we will explore that a little bit more this evening. But the degrees of geometry are laid out to correspond with the movements of the sun, which is also measured in degrees, both in terms of temperature and movement across the sky, moving 1 degree every day. Sun or dragon worship is numerically interwoven into the systems of geometry that we've been taught, which in fact were given to us by the dragons or gods. And this is provable by the fact that they have somehow amazingly interlocked this numerical code into near enough everything we do. As you said, degrees, interesting to notice. We spoke about degrees when we looked at the Freemasons, okay? 33 degrees. I love this word degrees because it keeps coming up, okay? It comes up when we talk about degrees on a protractor. And of course, you talk about the temperature outside. Oh, it's, you know, it's warm. It's either Fahrenheit or Celsius. It's 30 degrees Celsius or, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So these words keep coming up again and again because they are referencing pretty much the same mathematical code, okay? So let's go on to kind of explain a little bit more about how they are representative of each other. First, you need to understand that the sun's movement through the sky is in fact measured by degrees and that the sun moves 1 degree every single day. Now, this is in fact the reason why you have 360 degrees that make up a circle. Let me go back here. You have 360 degrees that make up a circle because if you look at it, you have 365 or 366 days that's in the leap year, okay? Now, people are going, hang on, that doesn't correspond. If the sun moves 1 degree every day, why are there not 366 degrees in a full circumference circle? And that is because the ancient cultures paid very close attention to the movements of the sun, and the sun actually appears to stop at a certain point, and we'll talk about this a bit more, okay? But just to give you an idea, the sun actually stops at the various solstices. It appears, or at least it appears to stop moving in the sky. For example, on the 21st of December, which is winter solstice, the sun stops moving. It doesn't lift or lower any more at its higher point for a period of 3 days, and this is known as the death of the sun. And then, of course, on the 25th of December, the sun moves 1 degree to the north, and this is known as the birth of the sun, or Christmas, which, of course, is why Jesus is allegorical of a sun god, and we'll discuss that more as well. But this is how you actually end up with a situation where we're looking at 360 degrees, but for 3 days, twice a year, right, what you have is the sun not moving, okay? So that's a total of, say, 6 days every year, so it brings you down to roughly 360, from 365 to 366. That's how you end up at 360, and it proves that the degrees on the protractor have been marked out with the movements of the sun. They are the degrees that the sun moves through the sky. That is why we have those measurements. What's interesting to notice is that the word solstice actually means solstitium, right, is the original meaning, which means sun stopping, solstitium, sun stopping. And as I said, it's because an astronomical event that happens twice a year, once in summer, once in winter, each year when the sun reaches the highest position in the sky as seen from the North or South Pole. During solstices, the tilt of the axle of the Earth with respect to the sun is a maximum of 23 degrees and 26 minutes. Solstices are preferably referenced as June solstice, which is the northern solstice, or December solstice, which is the southern solstice. Our solstice in the northern hemisphere for summer occurs from the 20th or the 21st of June, and in winter it's the 21st or 22nd of December each year. During summer solstice, during summer, the day of the solstice is the longest day of the year, and during winter, the day of the solstice is the shortest day of the year. But then on either side of the solstice, what you have is 3 days where the sun does not appear to move in from the horizon of the sky, which is why it's known as the death of the sun, or the sun stopping. Hence why we lose 6 days when we create the protractor of 360 degrees instead of 366 degrees. It's because there is no movement of the sun perceivably for 6 days of the year. So the angles or degrees of geometry correspond with the angles or degrees of the sun. At solstice, which happens twice a year, the sun appears to stop moving on the horizon for 3 days, totaling 6 days because it happens twice a year. 3 times 3 plus 3 is 6. Hence why you have, although we have 365 or 366 days in a year, we only have 360 degrees which make up the geometric circle. It's because of the sun stopping or the solstices. Okay. Now it's interesting to notice. We did a lot for Zodiac and Dragonology to explore all the various symbolic allegories, and what is interesting to notice is that the protractor, the full circle of the protractor, has some really interesting symbolic significance or a similarity to some of the other symbols that we learn about in Dragonology. Of course, one of the most commonly known symbols that we learn about in Dragonology is the Zodiac. Okay, and the Zodiac is supposedly the oldest conceptual image known to man, without exception. There is nothing older that we have come across in terms of conceptual images with multi-layered allegories that go quite as far back as the Zodiac. And what the Zodiac actually represents is the course of the sun's travel through the sky over the period of a year. And at different times of the year, the sun is in different constellations. So, for example, when it's by birthday, end of May, beginning of June, it is the constellation of Gemini, the twins, for example. And it's all calendrical, which of course is linked into the solar cycle. So again, it's not just this particular ancient symbolic depiction being the zodiac, which is linked into the cycle of the sun. It's also, wow, look at this, the protractor, as we have just demonstrated, because each of these degrees that you have on the protractor is 1 degree that the sun moves in the sky every single day. So the protractor, or the geometric full circumference circle totaling 360 degrees, is in fact based upon the movements of the sun. And we have thus been taught all of our various geometric measurements according to sun symbolism and sun allegory, which has been mathematically interwoven into the coding of our reality. Okay, very, very common. Now, just look how similar that these two look to each other, whilst both having completely different functions, and yet, deep in their symbolic occult allegory, they are both referencing the movements of the sun. Because as we have discussed previously in Dragonology, most rituals are in fact annual rituals which are tied into the movements of the sun. They are agrarian rituals linked to harvest time and spring and all of that. So of course, the movements of the sun was very important to the ancient peoples because of the fact that it really was how they marked things out, and it's played through so many different aspects of the symbolic allegory. It's actually so interesting to observe, because if you start looking at other measurements of the sun, okay, perhaps not the full year, but perhaps the full day, the clock that we use, the clock with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the face of the clock that we commonly use, of course, corresponds with the cross of the zodiac. Let's again mention that the vertical and horizontal lines of the zodiac mark out the solstice and equinox. We've already spoken about how important the solstice and equinoxes are. Mark out the solstice and equinox on the zodiac. And we pretty much had the same thing here. And I like this particular depiction of the clock face because it also has a depiction of the 12 zodiac signs to match the 12 numerical representations on the clock face. Again, you can see how, like this, the clock face can be divided up into quarters, and the quarters all have divisions of 3. Again, we have the 3 coming back in because 12, of course, can be divided by 3. 3, 6, 9, 12. We spoke about that. These numbers keep coming back again and again and again in Dragonology. 3, 6, 9, 12. And as we have already said, the sun is in fact a symbol of, well, we should say that Jesus is in fact a sun symbol. And there's various ways in which this is laid out, because when you start looking at the sun cross, okay, the cross of the zodiac, it's actually what gives the Christianic cross its form. That is where we get the representation of the Christian religion, which is supposedly the Jesus' cross. Many people think it's representative of the torture instrument, the cross of the crucifix upon which Jesus was crucified, but it actually, in actual fact, is more representative of the cross of the zodiac, which is made up, the arms of it are made up by the lines representing the solstice and the equinox. Of course, the cross and circle is commonly known as a zodiac symbol, and turns up in various representations as you go through various cultural mythologies. Again, here we can see the movements of the sun through the course of the year at different points, and which zodiac signs are obviously in the sky at that time. The circle or the cross of the zodiac is absolutely all about the movements of the sun, which is why when you find pictures of Jesus with a sun crown around his head in a circle or a cosmic egg like this, a zodiacal depiction depicting the 12 symbols of the zodiac, you know that what they're depicting is the sun god allegory. Okay? That is what the cross of the zodiac represents. It represents the sun god allegory, which of course Jesus was, which is why we use the cross as a symbol of Christianity. And this is very obvious when you start doing a little bit of research and looking at just how this sun cross turns up behind the head of various depictions of Jesus. Okay, the sun and the cross in the middle is really a zodiac symbol, as you can see over here. That is what is being represented, and of course Jesus was the Son of God for a reason, because he was a sun god. And of course, as we've spoken about, the halo represents the sun. This is normally why you see a halo around the head, because it is an allegory towards the sun, as we've seen by the 8 shaped, the analemma, which again represents the movements of the sun. It all comes back to the same thing. It's about the movements of the sun. Now, in this particular very famous depiction by Leonardo da Vinci, who was an initiated artist, initiated into the secret society known as the Priory of Sion, which means the Priory of the Sun, interesting enough. Leonardo da Vinci was endowed with occult knowledge, and he encoded geometric configurations into his artworks as a result of being very endowed with all this occult numerology and symbolism. And in his depiction of the Last Supper, we've been through this several times in Dragonology, but I will go through it again. You'll notice the various representations we have here. You've got the 12 apostles. Notice the 12 apostles on either side of Jesus, okay, divided into groups of 4 with 3 in each group. 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, and 3 here, okay? And of course, Jesus in the center. No matter which way you take a line through this painting, and in fact, if you follow the lines all the way along the perspective, they very much all end up with Jesus' face being the most central point of this painting. Take a line along those roof parts there. Again, the sun always being the central part of the cross of the zodiac. Have a look there. There's the sun in the middle, which again, we've proven, as we've said, Jesus is a sun god, which is why he is represented with a sun and a cross behind him. And this is what Leonardo da Vinci was depicting in this particular painting of the Last Supper, is the fact that Jesus is, in fact, a sun god. Okay? And the numerology, or the geometric sacred geometry elements, are actually also encoded into this painting. Very interesting. You may notice down here as well, you've got the 12 signs of the zodiac, as well as the 4 seasons with the 3 months in each season, which again just is representative of the cross of the zodiac. There are many pre-Christian sun gods that were born before Jesus that are also born on the 25th of December, and they're also commonly depicted with suns, okay? Here's the Persian or Roman sun god known as Mithra, where we get the word mythology from. Mithra is commonly depicted with sun rays coming out from behind his head. And of course, we do a lot with horse symbolism in Dragonology as well. But in a culture completely different, here we have Horus from the ancient Egypt. Horus, as we know, is a sun god depicted here with a sun on his head. But this particular sun is surrounded by a serpent. Interesting to notice this depiction of Horus, of course, being with the head of a peregrine falcon. All right, that is how you know it's Horus. Horus is always depicted as the peregrine falcon. And what makes the peregrine falcon so unique is this particular black marking which hooks back here behind the eye. That's how you know it's the peregrine falcon, the fastest animal on the planet. It's interesting to notice that the sun and the serpent symbol are almost inextricably linked. You cannot separate them. Here in ancient Egyptian mythology, you can see them in 2 different contexts, as we've already expressed. First, as a serpent surrounding a sun above the sun god Horus. Okay, and then of course as serpents on either side of the solar disk, and we call these serpents, the ones that flank the solar disk, we call them the Urays. Interesting to notice, also flanked by a set of dragon wings, serpents and wings, and solar disks, all inextricably linked. And of course, sun and serpent symbolism are always representative of the dragon. It doesn't matter which cultural history you kind of look at, they very much are primary symbols. These are what we call first level primary symbols of the dragon. And then you have many extended symbols which are allegories. For example, the lion is a sun symbol. The sun symbol is a symbol of the dragon. So it's layered like that. But interesting to notice this particular depiction of a serpent with the sun from an occult image. But from the movie Conan the Barbarian, they talk about serpent worshipping cults, and very interesting. You see a serpent shape-shifting there. James Earl Jones plays a shape-shifting, a king shape-shifts into a serpent. But look at these interesting, you don't know what they are, you want to call them, these sort of poles that they held, with the headpieces being a sun with a serpent. Okay, sun and serpent symbolism are inextricably linked. Sun and serpent symbolism are symbols which represent the dragon. And it's interesting then, of course, to notice as we head towards the end of Dragonology tonight, where sun and serpent symbolism turn up most commonly and why it's important to know. Because if you understand how global affairs are structured and who ultimately controls it all at the very top, you'll understand why it's important to look at the logos and understand what they mean. For example, the Jesuit logo. The Jesuits use the sun symbol as their logo, but what most people also don't realize is that these curved little lines that come out of the sun, well, they are representations of serpents. So here again, we have the combined sun-serpent symbolism, which is much deeper allegory for what? The dragon. Missed anything, guys? Well, you're welcome to go back and check out all the episodes 1 to 8 of Season 3, which are available to view on our website, Dragonology.info. And of course, if you've missed anything from Seasons 1 and 2, please feel free to go back and check that out too. They're also available on the website, Dragonology.info. Dragonology Book 1 Spellbreaker is now available for sale on Dragonology.info. Please feel free to download your copy. It is a €25 cost, but if you use the discount code DragonologyS3, which stands for Dragonology Season 3, you get a €5 discount and you can download the book for €20. So that's Dragonology S3. That'll be a discount code for your €5 discount on Book 1 Spellbreaker. Really worthwhile reading. And if you've missed anything on CCN, please feel free to check out our broadcast guides to see when this and other broadcasts are on the Free and Independent Media Network. And all our archives are, of course, put onto a special website called ccn.media. So please check out ccn.media, which is where all the archives are available. We've done over 2,000 shows in 2 years and a bit now, and wow, it's really an amazing collection of work. So feel free to go check out the backlog of information that we have for you. Amazing, informative, educational material. Do check out anything else regarding Conscious Consumer Network on the main website, consciousconsumerNetwork.tv. Check out the live broadcast. If you want to go straight to live broadcast as we are doing now, you go over here to live. The broadcast guide, of course, is always on the homepage. Feel free to donate or support any one of the fundraisers that we have going at any given time. CCN is, of course, a publicly sponsored network. It is community run, and it is created to support and educate humanity. It is really set up as a humanitarian project. So feel free to get involved in supporting and funding Conscious Consumer Network in any way you can. Or if you want to support us in any other way, get in touch via email, info@consciousconsumernetwork.tv. We'd always love to hear from you. And that's it for us tonight, folks. Thank you, as always, for tuning in for yet another episode of Dragonology. As always, we thank you for supporting free and independent media. That is it from me, Mel Ve, and I shall see you again. Good night. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire: the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.